So he's doing all of the erosions of due process and the erosions of the First Amendment over immigration enforcement. But it's not going to stop at immigration enforcement. Once you can do anything and everything you want to non-citizens and you eradicate due process, you can just simply consider citizens to be non-citizens as well. And once you clearly deport them to El Salvador, to the facility, it seems like even the Supreme Court cannot demand that you bring these people back. This is where we're at. All right, let's get to it. Let's start off with the U.S. and El Salvador doubling down on mistakenly deported man despite court order. We're obviously going to be talking about that. It's a pretty significant deal. It is a turning point for the United States in a sea of awful things that the Trump administration has done. We're back at it again. We're back at it again in this field where the Trump administration is actively defying the Supreme Court's unanimous decision on the facilitation of returning the wrongfully deported man from Maryland back to the United States of America. As you guys know, as I've talked about over and over again over the past week and a half, there is, this is a truly horrifying situation. It's unconscionable, it's immoral, and it is also unconstitutional. They're kidnapping people, they're disappearing people into El Salvador, and it's very obvious that this is the modus operandi. They're not going to change it. This is 1 day after the highly anticipated Oval Office meeting where the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, said he would not return a wrongly deported Maryland man being held in his country in the CCOT anti-terror facilities. The federal judge who ordered his return will hear from the Trump administration's attorneys at a court hearing on this wonderful afternoon. Okay, that's going to be happening in a couple hours. We're, of course, talking about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is now entering his second month in the El Salvador mega prison after he was deported there on March 15th, even though there was a 2019 court order that barred his deportation to that country. Okay? That means that in an immigration court, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was found to, one, not be a member of any gang whatsoever, but more importantly than that, specifically not deportable to the country of El Salvador, given that he was not only not a gang member, not a member of MS-13 at all, but also beyond that, he had actually given information up on a competing Salvadoran gang, which put his life in the crosshairs if he were to ever return to El Salvador. This is precisely how he got a 2019 court order for a withdrawal of removal. A withdrawal of removal has a higher standard to clear than a pure asylum application. Okay? Is there feedback? Is there echo? What's going on? Are you guys messing up with me? Or yeah, he had sufficiently proven in court that he was endangered. Okay? He had delivered information on a Salvadoran gang in the past as well, which put his life in harm's way if he were to ever return to El Salvador. Do you understand? Trump administration officials, on the other hand, claim falsely that Abrego Garcia, who escaped political violence in El Salvador in 2011, is a member of the criminal gang MS-13, and yet they have provided zero evidence. A withhold of removal. Did I say withdrawal? Oh, God damn it. I mess this up every time. A withholding of removal. Okay? It is, you go to the courts, there's a couple different things you can do as a migrant, as an immigrant, as an asylum seeker, okay? Someone who is escaping political violence, okay? One of the things you can ask for is a withholding, which means that as a Salvadoran, as a Salvadoran man, as someone from El Salvador, if you come to the United States of America and seek asylum on U.S. soil and prove in a court of law that you are escaping political persecution or any sort of like serious violence, that you can make it so that it is illegal for the government to deport you to El Salvador, even if you haven't processed your asylum eligibility, even if you haven't completed your asylum, application, even if you haven't completed your immigration status, for example, that still means that the government cannot remove you from U.S. soil and send you to El Salvador. And that's precisely what the American government did. And not only did they do that, but they kept lying about how he was a terrorist, how he was an MS-13 member, how he was a terrorist. It is disgusting. And it is just pure white nativist, white supremacist, anti-immigrant garbage. And yet, seemingly, given the past couple of years of uninterrupted, unrestricted, white supremacist, anti-immigrant garbage that has dominated the airwaves, there is very little pushback that was developed in this process. People are not ready and well-equipped to actively fight against such a thing. Do you understand? Audio is glitchy. Is it? Why are there people who are saying that there's echo and that there's audio that's glitchy? I genuinely can't tell if people are messing with me or not. I genuinely cannot tell. Anyway, now, for those of you who don't know the background of this deal, this scheme that has been put together, the Trump administration has set up an arrangement where they are paying El Salvador $6 million to house migrants deported from the United States as a part of President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. $6 million, okay? Small price to pay for having a slave labor colony where you can just make people disappear to, okay? This slave labor colony also is not beholden to U.S. constitutional protections, of course. It's like Gitmo on steroids, basically. And yesterday, there was obviously a meeting in the Oval Office where Attorney General Pam Bondi and Stephen Miller spoke on the matter. Let's take a look at the ABC News coverage on this, and I'll talk about it a little bit more.
Legal showdown over a wrongfully deported Salvadoran national. The Trump administration is resisting a Supreme Court order to facilitate the man's return to the U.S., and El Salvador's president refused to send the men back in a White House meeting with President Trump. Senior national correspondent Terry Moran has the story.
Unfortunately, withholding is a final order of removal that is withheld, but the government can exercise that final order at their discretion. That is also false. You are wrong. The federal government could technically remove the withholding order, okay? They could. But there's a process to do that. The Trump administration did not do that. In that court process, through the details, you have to go through what this person has done, go through their fucking background, and detail out exactly why the previous court order was wrong. They did not process this application at all. There was no due process whatsoever. And to take it one step further, a federal government immigration attorney unironically admitted that they had fucked up. This is why we are having this conversation right now, because when you look at all of the data that civil rights groups and immigration advocacy groups have compiled at this point, 90% of all of the people that have been deported to CCOT right now in El Salvador have no crimes, no criminal background whatsoever. 90%. The only reason why we are talking about this Maryland man is because the federal government admitted that they had engaged in this wrongdoing, specifically because he had the background. He had the previous court order. And yes, Aaron Reichlin Melnick, who I rely on quite a bit, senior fellow at IMM Council, has put together a wonderful presentation of the timeline of Abrego Garcia's gang allegations and what the facts are and what the fictitious nature of the claims are. I'm going to get to that in a second. Let's look at what the Trump administration is saying first and foremost.
Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, George. It's a nightmare scenario here. The Trump administration admits it mistakenly deported Kilmer Abrego Garcia to that notorious prison in El Salvador. And now they say the U.S. is powerless to get him back, despite an order upheld by the Supreme Court to bring him home. This morning, a stunning comment from President Trump caught on a live streaming camera before reporters were in the Oval Office, telling the president of El Salvador he'd like to send American citizens convicted of crimes to prisons in El Salvador.
I said, homegrowns are next. The homegrowns. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's big. All right? It's not big enough.
Minutes later, with reporters in the room, Trump said he wants Attorney General Pam Bondi to see if the law allows this.
I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that.
The president musing that this proposal could help with America's prison population.
I'm all for it because we can do things with the president for less money and have great security. And we have a huge prison population.
And it isn't the first time Trump's threatened.
Yeah, not only are they doing this to non-citizens, they want to do this to citizens as well. Just remember, this is how it slowly but surely turns into something that is illegal. It turns from something that the government is doing that is completely illegal to something that is legal and expected. Okay? It doesn't happen overnight. It took decades to get to this point in the post-war on terror, post-9/11 era in the United States of America. There's clearly a lot of appetite for this kind of violence from a big chunk of the population who does not understand how terrifying this is, who have no capacity to demonstrate empathy for their fellow man, and therefore they're championing this because they think this is immigration enforcement. Donald Trump recognizes that immigration enforcement is a big part of why he won. So he's doing all of the erosions of due process and the erosions of the First Amendment over immigration enforcement. But it's not going to stop at immigration enforcement. Once you can do anything and everything you want to non-citizens and you eradicate due process, you can just simply consider citizens to be non-citizens as well. And once you clearly deport them to El Salvador, to this terror facility, it seems like even the Supreme Court cannot demand that you bring these people back. This is where we're at. If the Democratic Party does not actually fight back against this, if people don't make a big fuss about this, if people don't actually go out and not only protest, but also try to desperately get more people on board with how unjustifiable this action is, we are cooked. America is officially within the 1930s Nazi Germany arc, okay? The Burger Reich.
To send U.S. citizens to prisons overseas. In February, he said this.
I'm just saying, if we had the legal right to do it, I would do it in a heartbeat.
All this is Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
When will you advocate for more forceful resistance against the Nazi government? Just curious what the line is for you. HasanAbi, that's a very funny and interesting question to ask someone who has to maintain a platform to consistently inform the broader public. Yeah, dude. The answer is never, okay? Are you stupid? Of course I'm not going to advocate for violence. Are you crazy? Is this bait? Are you a federal agent? Do you know what my job is? My job is to educate the masses, okay? Please.
A Salvadoran migrant, husband and father living in Maryland, languishes in that notorious Salvadoran prison despite a court order that the administration must bring him back to the U.S.
Big homie's looking at the Trump administration doing Nazi stuff and going, hey, why won't you agitate for people to engage in direct acts of violence so that we can send you to the El Salvador facility, as a matter of fact? Yeah.
Yes. The government claims Abrego Garcia is a member of the MS-13 gang, but a federal judge said last week they have offered no evidence to back that up, and he has no criminal record here.
Hasan, do you know anyone in immigration at the state level? I'm desperate as fuck, man. It's been 2 years of headache. No, I do not. Especially not under this government in any way, shape, or form. I'm sorry, Jake and Bake. I literally don't know. And I don't even know where to begin on that stuff to, you know. Here
or in El Salvador. And the Supreme Court last week unanimously ruled.
Also, why the fuck, dog? It's getting worse. Dude, I'm going to be honest with you, Jake. Jake, it's just you and me right now. Listen to me. Stay the fuck in China. What are you doing, dude? You literally lucked in. You already lucked in. You speak Mandarin. Just work your way up the ranks. Meet the members of Chinese Politburo and stay the fuck in China. You are already living the goddamn dream. What is wrong with you? Why would you come back here? Why would you want to bring a wonderful Chinese netizen to the horrible U.S. soil? You are already living in the fucking future. Become the white monkey that we all dream of becoming one day. What the fuck are you doing? He loved burger too much? So do the Chinese. China is the most Amerifat-coded nation on the fucking planet. I keep repeating this over and over again. The Chinese people love America. They love American culture. They love American commodity consumption. Y'all are crazy. Chinese love burger, okay? China has burger. China has the most burger. What are you guys talking about? Like, the one thing China doesn't have is blood in video games and skeletons in video games. That's it. That's like the biggest L. Other than that, they got it all. Calm down, everybody.
That the U.S. government must facilitate Abrego Garcia's return, calling his removal illegal. Trump at first said he'd abide by the Supreme Court's ruling.
If they said to bring him back, I would tell them to bring him back.
Now the administration says their hands are tied.
That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us.
But in the Oval Office, the president of El Salvador made clear he's got no plans to send Abrego Garcia back to the U.S.
How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous.
The Democratic leader of the House calling on the courts to use judicial powers.
Virtually every single person from the administration and people in their sphere of influence is just lying on this man. So let's talk about the actual truth. Let's talk about the background of Abrego Garcia. This is Aaron Reichlin Melnick, senior fellow of IMM's counsel, updating Aaron the Last Box, presenting the full version of Mr. Abrego's time in the U.S. using court documents to explain the allegations of gang membership and what actually happened in his case. Here it is. Okay. Entry and early life. Hold on. 2011 to 2019. Okay. Kilmar Abrego Garcia flees El Salvador to the U.S. at the age of 16 after M18 gang members extort his family and threaten to kill him and rape his sisters if they didn't keep paying. He moves in with his U.S. citizen brother in Maryland and lives there without trouble for years. Then comes, on March 28th, 2019, the PGPD arrest. Kilmar is arrested for loitering outside of a Home Depot while looking for day labor. A Prince George's County Police Department detective grills him about whether he's a gang member. He denies any involvement. 4 hours later, he is transferred to ICE custody without the PGPD charging him for any offense. In April 2019, here are the allegations. At a bond hearing, ICE claims Kilmar is a part of MS-13. They submit one piece of evidence, a gang field interview sheet, a GFIS, filled out by the PGPD detective that claims Kilmar is a part of MS-13. The GFIS says he was wearing Chicago Bulls gear, and a confidential informant allegedly claimed that Kilmar was a ranking member of the Westerns clique, which is in Long Island. Except there's a problem there. Abrego has never been in Long Island. He's never been in New York at all. So this evidence is fabricated. And lo and behold, the local detective, as a matter of fact, that accused Mr. Abrego Garcia of being a member of MS-13 was suspended from the police force and indicted merely weeks later for providing confidential information to a sex worker who he was paying in exchange for sexual acts. That's right. I repeat, the cop who initially attested to Abrego Garcia's alleged MS-13 membership was subsequently suspended and indicted for serious professional misconduct. Remember, we're talking about a cop here, okay? If a police officer, a detective, is fired and suspended and indicted for misconduct, that means they must have gone above and beyond. Do you understand what I am saying? And the confidential informant that he used was also unreliable. The evidence itself that they presented was immediately disproven, and I'm going to get to in a second, okay? But remember, the Maryland police officer who formally attested to Abrego Garcia's supposed gang affiliation in 2019 when he was first detained the first time was subsequently suspended from the police force for a serious transgression, giving confidential information about a case to a sex worker the New Republic has established. This officer, apparently a senior detective in Abrego Garcia's case in 2019, is named Ivan Mendez, according to information provided to Abrego Garcia's lawyer by, at the time, Lucia Cruel, who is also a member of his current legal team. Mendez was subsequently indicted for his offense, pleaded guilty, and received probation. So that's another thing. So let's continue. An investigation follows in the summer of 2019. Kilmar's lawyers reach out to the PGPD to investigate these claims. They find out that 1, police did not even file an incident report about his arrest, and 2, the detective that had filled out the GFIS has been suspended for an unknown reason. We now know what the reason is. I just described to you what the reason is. In August 2019, there is an IJ decision. At his final bond hearing, ICE declines to offer any evidence of gang membership other than what is in the GFIS. The IJ denies bond, finding that the GFIS is sufficient proof of membership at the time, despite noting its obvious flaws. Kilmar appeals this decision to the Board of Immigration Appeals. Now, remember, the immigration courts are an extension of the federal government. They're an extension of ICE. Okay, so you have the process where you can appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals, but ultimately, this is somewhat irrelevant because the erroneous decision making there is it's basically an extension. It's a processor of what the federal government or what the immigration enforcement authorities want to do. That's all they're there to do. They're rubber stamping this stuff. Okay, the immigration courts are under the DOJ, part of the executive branch, and not under the judiciary. So just remember that. Having said that, the only reason why I'm mentioning this is because something silly and frivolous like this that is immediately disproven can still cause someone to basically be branded as a member of a fucking criminal organization when there's no evidence whatsoever for it. Okay? What is the point of those courts if they just 100% accept everything anyway? It's a way to create paperwork, so to show that there's some sort of process. It's the same principle behind FISA courts. The FISA courts are there to rubber stamp warrantless surveillance and offer them a warrant, right? But it's better that even that exists than not have it exist at all, if that makes sense. Although it is still a rubber stamp protocol, it's still good that even that rubber stamping of the protocol exists as opposed to not existing, because when it doesn't exist at all, then you have no paperwork, you have no way of holding up this process, you have no way of stopping these sorts of things from happening. Okay? Now, with holding win, the immigration judge rules on October 2019 that Kilmar is ineligible for asylum because he filed the application too late, but the judge does grant withholding of removal, finding that it was more likely than not that he would be subject to persecution if deported to El Salvador. A removal order is issued, but with a restriction that one country he cannot be deported to is El Salvador. Okay? Then comes the BIA decision. The Board of Immigration Appeals decision in December 2019. Kilmar appeals the bond decision to the Board of Immigration Appeals. The appeals board declines to find clear error in the immigration judge's decision to rely on the GFIS document. However, he is released anyway because he had won a withholding of removal. He returns to normal life from 2019 to 2025. By all reports, Kilmar lives a normal life in Maryland with his U.S. citizen wife, their biological son, and his 2 stepchildren, with the work permit he received as a result of his grant of withholding of removal. He works legally as a sheet metal worker, joins a union, and raises his family in a D.C. suburb. He doesn't get into any trouble with the law in these years. And then on March 2025, he gets sent to CCOT. On March 12, 2025, ICE and HSI agents arrest Kilmar in his car in front of his son. 3 days later, he's transferred to Texas, where, thanks to an admitted administrative error, he is put on a plane to El Salvador and sent to CCOT. So this is just a person that is married, that has immediate family members in the United States of America, that was falsely smeared as an MS-13 gang member, and every step of that process, there was enough evidence to suggest that not only was he not an MS-13 gang member, that he was directly at threat by MS-13 gang members if they were to send him back to El Salvador. Okay? If they were to send him back to El Salvador, that MS-13, he's so not MS-13 that they would kill him. That is what the courts have found. And yet, every single person still that, on the one hand, admit that they falsely deported him are simultaneously claiming that he is an MS-13 gang member and also that it's good that he is in El Salvador and there's no way to bring him back, okay? In a normal process, in a just world, Abrego Garcia enters the United States fleeing El Salvador because of fleeing the gang violence in El Salvador and expeditiously gets an asylum claim that is granted to him. Clearly, if there is a withholding of removal that a court gave him, that literally means that there is enough here, or more than an asylum application, as a matter of fact, more than just a simple asylum application. This means that there is additional evidence that he's presented as to why he cannot be deported to El Salvador, and that a judge oversaw this evidence and said, yes, there is enough evidence here for you not to be deported specifically to El Salvador. Okay? It's more than an asylum application. It is a higher standard to clear than an asylum application. It is shocking, I guess. I guess it's not really unexpected that the administration would be this careless and this inconsiderate, because they are fascist. All right? But just so you know, when people say he's MS-13, that is a fucking lie. Okay? That's just a lie. He is so not MS-13 that he is directly in the crosshairs of MS-13, at least according to an immigration judge that said, we can't deport this man to El Salvador specifically. There's enough evidence here to suggest that we cannot, because he is so not MS-13, we cannot deport him to El Salvador because they'll fucking kill him in El Salvador if he goes there. And yet here we are. So this is where the chart is from. For a more comprehensive written version of the timeline where Mr. Abrego's presence in the U.S. using the same sources, check out this great piece from Roger Parloff, senior editor at Lawfare. He wrote extensively on the details and the timeline of events. Okay? Now, I want to point to something here. The very fact that we are even covering this story is because the administration, the immigration attorney on the federal side admitted that there was an administrative error, because there was one, right? There was an administrative error, and they admitted that there was an administrative error, which turned this into a bigger story. There are plenty of people that this administration has actively deported that did no wrongdoing whatsoever. Some of them were temporary protected status holders. Some of them were in the process of seeking out their asylum claims. Some of them had been in the country for longer than they could actually process their asylum claim, so they potentially could not get an asylum claim, but they should get one, that they should get amnesty, right? Under normal circumstances, in a world where we have a normal process for immigration, we would file amnesty, conditional amnesty to all of these people, 90% of them that have done no wrongdoing whatsoever, and now they're in a torture slave prison for the crime of crossing an imaginary boundary and wanting a better future for themselves and their children. Kidnapped in the street. Some of them so falsely and erroneously kidnapped from the street that ICE itself, in the process of said kidnapping, will recognize that it's not the right person. Manuel Gutierrez, sent from New York to El Salvador prison, although family says he has no criminal history or gang ties. He's 19 years old. A 19-year-old Venezuelan in New York City reportedly was apprehended by Trump administration immigration authorities and deported to El Salvador, despite agents realizing he was not whom they meant to arrest in a targeted operation. These are called, I believe they're called like collateral, something along, I forget what the term is that ICE uses, but they'll say like it's a collateral arrest. So, you know, wrong place, wrong time, doesn't matter. We can boost our numbers this way. Manuel Gutierrez, whose family opened an asylum case after arriving in the U.S., was deported from the Bronx to the notorious Sikap prison in El Salvador, despite his relatives' insistence that he has no ties or criminal history, no gang ties or criminal history. Yeah, he was a collateral detainee. According to Documented, a newsroom dedicated to telling stories of immigrants in New York City, the Gutierrez family says it has been left without information or answers. The team was detained alongside 237 other Venezuelans on February 24th by ICE. His father, Wilmer Gutierrez, told Documented, "I feel like my son was kidnapped," because that's precisely what happened. "I've spent countless hours searching for him, going from one precinct to another, speaking with numerous people who kept referring me elsewhere. Yet after all this, no one has given me any information or provided a single document about his case." The elder Gutierrez reportedly said he overheard ICE agents saying that his son had not been the person they had come to get. "The officers grabbed him and two other boys right at the entrance of our building. One said, 'No, he's not the one,' like they were looking for someone else. But the other said, 'Take him anyway.' Gutierrez has no criminal record either in Venezuela or the U.S., his family said. He also did not have any tattoos, which is a feature that U.S. law enforcement often use to link people to Tren de Aragua, a transnational criminal organization from Venezuela, and to justify their expulsions from the country." The points-based system that they have for determining whether or not someone is a criminal gang member is already ridiculous. This is precisely the reason why that gay hairstylist was kidnapped and deported, because he had mom and dad tattoos on his arms. Or that other person who works with children with disabilities who had an autism awareness tattoo dedicated to his autistic cousin. That's why he was fucking kidnapped. There was another person who had a Real Madrid tattoo with a crown and a soccer ball. That's why he was kidnapped. It's ridiculous. And now all of those people are now in this torture prison with seemingly no way of returning them. But the only reason why we're talking about specifically Abrego Garcia is that, unlike those people, Abrego Garcia had a previous court order that said you cannot deport him to El Salvador, and yet the government violated that previous court order anyway. And on top of that, the Supreme Court found that the federal government has to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia in a unanimous decision. And yet the Trump administration is claiming that the Supreme Court actually gave them all of the power here because it's a matter of foreign policy. It's not a matter of foreign policy. We have determined wrongdoing in the past within the immigration enforcement system and have even demanded El Salvador return people that we sent to CCOT. The Trump administration has done this. Every administration prior, in the process of mass deportations, because we have a cruel white nativist immigration agenda, have falsely sent people overseas and sent people to countries that they are not supposed to be sent to. And then we have followed through. CEO of Bad Takes. Yeah, I'm the CEO of Bad Takes. Do you have a good take? Do you have a counter to anything that I'm saying? Do you have any sort of counter narrative here, or are you just simply going to go la la? He's Mexican and therefore terrorist. Sucks to suck. The Great White Hope is fixing the country, right? That's what you're going to say. I know they were MS-13. Yep, there you go. No, they weren't. I just spent the entire past hour. If you understood the English language, if you had the processing capabilities, you would know that, no, that person was not MS-13 at all. Sorry, just arrived. Yeah, well, you're a fucking moron, okay? Not confirmed by the detectives either. The detective that wrote the erroneous report literally was subsequently suspended from the force, like a fucking couple weeks after he sent in that report. The report itself had two key pieces of evidence that suggest that Abrego Garcia was MS-13. Do you know what those pieces of evidence were? I just covered it earlier. One, that he had a, Chicago Bulls hoodie? Ridiculous. That's not a fucking indication that anyone is an MS-13 member at all. And the second piece of evidence was a confidential informant, which, by the way, was not even a confidential informant. It was just one of the other guys at Home Depot that the detectives had actually nabbed, that falsely claimed that Abrego Garcia was a member of an MS-13 gang that was based out of Long Island. Abrego Garcia had never been to Long Island. He was a part of a Long Island MS-13 gang when he had never been there. There is no more an open shut court case than this one. It's fucking ridiculous. And yet people who are severely mentally backwards, mentally stunted, refuse to reckon with the reality in front of them and instead just go back to the same old dumbass takes where they're like, nah, I don't care, dude. He's a MS-13 gang member. They rape children. He was raping children. In your mind, you have to fantasize about this guy being the big bad, because otherwise, God forbid, you entertain the truth that this person is not a member of MS-13 and he was falsely fucking shipped off to El Salvador, even though a previous immigration court had decided he cannot be sent to El Salvador specifically because of how not MS-13 he is. I like to think that the cognitive dissonance demonstrated here by a lot of people who try to defend the administration's actions, especially when it comes to immigration enforcement, the reasons why they fantasize about how violent and dangerous this person was not only because they have this white supremacist dog in them that caused them to think every person that's brown is actually a fucking child rapist MS-13 gang member, but also because deep down they know that if a person who is clearly innocent is shipped off into a slave labor colony overseas with no means of returning this person, that's kind of fucked up. So they just don't want to believe the fucked up thing. So they delude themselves into thinking, no, it must not be fucked up, even when the government admits that they fucked up. That part that scares me is that trans people are next. Every single day I watch all this happening, knowing my number's about to be called. You're fine for the time being, I think. But, you know, anti-trans legislation is already popping off all over. Maybe not deportation.
To pressure the administration.
The Supreme Court and/or the federal district court actually needs to enforce its order.
Abrego Garcia's lawyer spoke with our Lindsay Davis, and he says he personally has worked with the Department of Homeland Security to bring back clients from other countries after winning their cases in court. Quote, he said, "We're not asking anybody to do anything illegal. We're asking them to follow the law." George?
Terry, this is very likely to go back to the Supreme Court absent any evidence that the administration is actually trying to get him back.
Absolutely. And the problem that the Supreme Court has is that they have no enforcement mechanism for the order that the administration is under. They have to count on the president to obey it.
Terry Moran, thanks very much.
In today's Capitol Close-Up, we welcome Maryland's Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen to discuss the latest developments.
Yeah, I really like what Chris Van Hollen is doing, and I really hope that other Democrats take notice of it and also participate in this. Yeah, I think what he's doing is good, and also demonstrates bravery as well. He's technically putting himself in harm's way by doing this. If he actually follows through on this and goes to El Salvador, much respect to him. I think that it is time for doing exactly this.
Regarding Kilmer Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man wrongfully deported to El Salvador. Senator, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Steve, good to be with you.
So a lot to get through, obviously, in a short amount of time, but let's focus right now on Kilmer Abrego Garcia. I know you reached out to the embassy here in D.C., the embassy of El Salvador, to try to request a meeting with the president of El Salvador while he is in D.C., meeting with President Trump. Have you had any success?
I've not. I reached out to request that meeting to talk about the, as you say, illegal detention of Abrego Garcia. We've not heard back from the president at this point in time.
You also mentioned if you didn't hear back, then you'd be willing to go to El Salvador. Is that still the case?
Yes, it is, Steve. I'll be going later this week. If he's not released, we still hope that he will be released. But I think it's important that we go to El Salvador to show his family, his wife, his mother, his brother, his kids, that we're not giving up on this because, as you indicated, the Trump administration has admitted that this was done in error.
This is the first time I'm not even joking when I say this is the first time I've felt even a modicum of confidence. A modicum of confidence and competence coming from the Democratic Party. Okay? This is what our public servants are supposed to do. They are supposed to uphold the law no matter what. They're supposed to defend their constituents no matter what. Abrego Garcia is a constituent. Okay? This is brave. This is bold. This is what the expectation is from all Democrats. I do not care about his other takes. I don't care about anything right now. With the exception of this initiative, okay? He is right. Is the idea that any adversary is MS-13 the American equivalent of they're all Hamas? Yes. I worry they will fumble it, like they only care about this case because it breaks the law. No, this is a very, very important thing. This is a very important thing that they're doing. It's a very important step that they're taking. Okay? And in some ways, not dissimilar to how Doctors Without Borders operates. Like when you're a white guy, when you're a white American citizen, when you're a white man who's an American citizen, for example, you have a certain set of privileges that that put you at a higher categorization as a target by any state, okay? When you're a fucking senator on top of that, you have literally the top level priority. So things that other foreign nations can do to you reflect on America as a whole. Do you see what I mean? He's a congressman. What the fuck? Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Protective presence is what they call it for the olive harvest. This is incredibly important. Like, I think this should be, is your arguments optics, guys, but unironically, because I agree. No, this isn't just optics either. This is putting your body on the line. You're using your privilege as a shield. You're using it as at the very least, as a way to refocus people's priorities and attentions to this incredibly unjust deportations regime. Do you see what I'm saying? This is actual action. I think that a competent Democratic Party would quite literally send an entire coalition of people armed to the gills with immigration attorneys and civil rights litigators down to El Salvador on a mission all together, okay, and make themselves impossible to deny, make themselves impossible to avoid. That is precisely what should be happening here.
And you can't just send somebody off to a notorious prison in El Salvador and say, whoops, that was a mistake. And that's why the Supreme Court, by a 9-0 ruling, said that the Trump administration had to facilitate his return.
So a couple of things. One, to your last point of sending someone to this notorious prison, is it more of an argument in your favor that this is someone who was not necessarily deported, but deported to the prison? How much of an impact does the prison make as opposed to someone being deported to El Salvador?
Well, both. I mean, he was here under protective status, and this is why the court, both the federal district court and the Supreme Court, determined that he can't just be essentially abducted from the country, that he gets his due process rights. That's a fundamental value that we have in this country. That's why the courts have been unanimous in their rulings here.
So now there's this legal limbo.
Yeah, if something happens to a U.S. senator, it becomes an international incident. It reflects poorly on El Salvador, and Trump looks weak if he doesn't respond to any provocations by El Salvador. Exactly. Do you see what I mean? Like, this becomes a major issue of consequence for the Trump administration if, as the American president, he literally lets El Salvador, a much tinier, much less powerful nation, dominate not only American citizens like this, but literally a fucking senator. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? Nah, they'll just say the senator was a terrorist. No shot. I don't think Americans will stand for it. I don't think Americans will stand for it. I disagree that Trump will look weak to his base. He'll just support it. They'll love that a Democrat is being hurt. No. I think you guys are wrong, and I think you're misunderstanding Trump's base in general. Yes, there will be the Asmongold coalition, but they are far from the... It's an unknown senator. Dude, it's a senator. What are you talking about? Why do you think the cartels don't touch American citizens and literally turn around and apologize when they accidentally kidnap or, God forbid, kill an American citizen? What happens if an American citizen is harmed by any citizen, like a fucking traveler, okay, a tourist, accidentally gets kidnapped by the cartel? What do? They assassinate the fucking cartel members that actually did wrongdoing to the American citizen. Why? Passport is a reflection of American hegemonic power, okay? That's a literal random American that we're talking about. Not every country is like Israel, okay? Israel gets to do whatever the fuck it wants, but other countries cannot get the Israel exemption, okay? You are crazy. This is not Rashida Tlaib either. This is not Ilhan Omar. This is a fucking white guy, dude. A white guy from Maryland. What are you guys talking about? The same principles, the same fundamentals that allow Americans to turn a blind eye to all this injustice because it's happening to brown people, white nativism, white supremacy, is the same principle that will cause them to pay close attention to a fucking white man, senator from Maryland, going to El Salvador. You can't do certain things to a guy like that. I think the old rule set is dead, my guy. No, this will cause tremendous instability, okay? What is happening in chat, by the way? Like, you guys are so pessimistic. Okay, you guys are so fucking pessimistic that you're like, what? What's the alternative? That he do nothing? What is happening here?
That Kilmer Abrigo Garcia is in. The president of the United States is saying he can't do anything about it. It's up to the president of El Salvador. The president of El Salvador said yesterday at the White House he can't do anything about it. He doesn't want to do anything about it. His contention is that this is a Salvadoran citizen who's being held in El Salvador, and he considers him to be a terrorist. President Trump could do something about it, but at this point he says he's leaving it up to El Salvador. Okay, so that's the backstory there. The Supreme Court said that you have to facilitate this. He's caught in legal limbo right now. So even by going to El Salvador, Senator, what can you do? What plan might be in place now if this is someone who is caught between the presidents of two countries, neither of which is making moves to bring him back to Maryland, your jurisdiction?
Well, you can call it legal limbo, or you can call it outright defiance of a court order. And that's what President Trump is doing, is defying a court order. Everybody knows that if he makes a request to the president of El Salvador to bring Abrego Garcia back, that would be complied with. After all, we are paying the government of El Salvador the money to keep these individuals detained. At the same time, the president of El Salvador, when he claims he has no power to release him, it's absurd. And this throwing around the term terrorism when this person has never been convicted of crime just shows the lies that we're hearing. I mean, that was just such an outrageous, bizarre episode at the White House the other day, where everyone's sort of saying, you know, I'm not going to let him go. I'm not going to try to let him go. I mean, this is in defiance of a court order. This country has stood for the rule of law and due process, and I'm going to go to El Salvador to try to see Abrego Garcia and also talk about his release. I will point.
You underestimate the anger, Hasan. Mike was right. The Democratic base is reaching a boiling point. What are you talking about? This is why I'm saying senators like this and actions that are taken like this is actually a good thing, because it fucking causes people to pay attention to what's going on. What are you saying right now? That this goes along with the anger and resentment and frustration that people experience. This is quite literally the point.
And out, Steve, that you know, the funding.
This is infinitely more directionally appropriate than what fucking Cory Booker was doing. Okay.
From the United States to El Salvador. And I'm not going to support one penny if this Marylander continues to be illegally detained there.
Senator, when you're a member of Congress, you have tremendous power, okay? I know that Donald Trump is actively trying to undermine the legislative body, and the Republicans have actually taken a lot of initiatives in that direction and have successfully undermined the legislative body, but you still have some fucking powers in your hands, okay? As a senator, you can just get a coalition together and try to revoke any sort of like foreign aid going to El Salvador, for example. Like, these are things that you can advocate for. You can veto the pre-existing aid that's going to El Salvador. You can fucking try and veto Trump's $6 million scheme, for example. Like, there's a lot that you can do. They have power. If they didn't have power, Trump wouldn't be actively trying to undermine the legislative body's power to begin with. Okay, 25% El Salvador GDP is U.S. aid. There you go. Shout out to Jim Jones for popping a senator at People's Temple on foreign land, ironically proving your point because he got flamed for it and investigated. Yeah. Oh.
I want to get some more right now in our top story, the legal saga over the fate of a Maryland man mistakenly.
Like, the very fact that this story is becoming a story, you have to understand something. If you're in here, if you're in this community, you've heard me talk about the deportations regime for quite a while. nonstop. I've offered endless coverage to this issue. So you're obviously very well aware of what the fuck's going on. But average Americans, if you recall my conversation with Ested Herndon of the New York Times, average Americans are not fully focused on the deportation side, and they're utterly oblivious to the cruel deportations regime that Trump has implemented. They're utterly oblivious to the violation of due process. They're utterly oblivious to the violations of the First Amendment on the anti-Israel student kidnappings that are taking place. All of this stuff is happening as the public has not been able to focus on it at all. Meanwhile, this is the story that finally tilts the scales in our direction because people are covering it. The mainstream is consistently covering it. It's becoming a point of contention. This will change the 2080 issue into a 50-50 issue and then inevitably turn it into a 2080 issue in the other direction. This is how it happens. People do not magically have this information beamed into their brains. They have to see it. They have to understand why it's like cruel, why it's unjust. And all of those liberals that we mock here on a daily fucking basis will play a formative role in getting the broad awareness campaign going. Okay? That's it. That's it. Even your fucking MAGA parents need to see this reality and go, I'm turning sour on this stuff. I don't like it. That's how it goes. That's why I still actively yell at the Democratic Party despite not believing in them, because I want them to actually make a fuss. Because if they make a fuss, then the media covers it. And when the media covers it, then inevitably more people are aware of what's going on. They demand their congresspersons to make even more of a fuss. This is how change happens. It doesn't happen with, the revolutionary violence in the way that you think it's going to happen overnight, okay? That's it. This is the unfortunate, sad state of affairs. Change is marginal. It does not happen overnight, and it happens only with unlikely allies. You have to keep pushing over and over and over again. This is why I laugh whenever dumb fucks who are neoliberals keep claiming, Hasan, you always have pie-in-the-sky ideas. You just want perfect to be an enemy of the good. And it's like, no, I don't. I understand that, but I want there to be some good. I understand how this system works a lot better than many of these fucking Democratic Party dick riders do, okay? This is precisely the reason why I will go out to bat and actively entertain politicians who I'm at odds with, regardless of my differences in agreement, differences in opinion, because I know that they have a lot of power still. They have a lot of power to get older people and people who vote and people in other positions of power to pay attention to these sorts of fucking issues. That's why I want Bernie Sanders to actively make more of a fuss in his fucking rallies, okay?
Deported to El Salvador. The White House doubling down right now on its refusal to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to the United States, despite a U.S. Supreme Court order to, quote, facilitate his return to the U.S. while also not infringing on the president's ability to conduct foreign affairs. Let's get some serious analysis right now from the former U.S. District Court Judge Shira Scheindlin. Judge Scheindlin, here's what President Trump said about this case on Friday. Listen to this.
This is going to change. I'm telling you right now. Chatters, up until this very moment, immigration was not at the forefront. People did not care about this, okay? Now you have national polls coming out with disapproval reaching the highest stage on immigration, Trump's strongest aspect, okay? Trump won on immigration, right? Democrats were fucking terrified. Democrats were fucking terrified of what Trump was doing on immigration. They were like, oh, yeah, we're going to be the immigrant deporters, actually. Trump is not serious on immigrant deportation. This is just the beginning. I don't know why people don't trust me when I talk about this shit. I've been doing this professionally for fucking 10 years. It wasn't that long ago when you had liberal wine moms talking about fucking abolishing ICE, dude, under the first Trump regime. Because they recognized the cruelty, because the media started covering it. They were like, what the fuck are you doing? What do you mean child separation is a deterrence? That's insane. That's torturous. That's not American. That's un-American. People do not pay attention to politics. And a lot of people do not understand the impact of the policies that they're advocating for, okay? People don't care about facts. People don't care about logic. People cannot comprehend what the vision that they want for the future to actually look like once implemented. Okay? Only after this vision is implemented do they go, oh my God, I was wrong. This sucks. And there is a very obvious example that is in front of us. Tariffs. Trump ran on tariffs. He said tariffs is the most beautiful word in the English language. People were like, yeah, I love tariffs. I yelled about how tariffs are fucking... tariffs and the way that Trump is trying to implement them are fucking idiotic over and over again for almost a year, and certainly over the course of the past couple of months. And yet, people did not listen. People did not understand it until it became a reality for them, until they were like, oh my God, the prices are going to go up. How did they start recognizing that? Because the media started covering it that way. Because politicians started yelling about it. Because they started fearing for their wallet. Once implemented, they flipped very quickly, if you noticed. So please, turn on TTS. No, I will not.
If the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do that. I respect the Supreme Court.
President Trump is now saying something very, very different. Is he defying a court order?
Well, he certainly isn't facilitating the return of Abrego Garcia, and that's what the court order requires him to do. I can't find any act he's taken that facilitates that return. I hear narrow construction that facilitate means, oh, I'll send an airplane if they want to let him go. And they, El Salvador, doesn't seem to want to let him go. But I think that's disingenuous at best. The United States has a lot of power. El Salvador is a little country. The president could say to the president of El Salvador, I want this guy back. And that would be the end of it. Then he'd be on a plane.
And they've done it in the past, by the way. They've done it in the past. So it's not like they haven't done this. I want to stress this again and again and again. They have successfully facilitated the return of people that were falsely deported to both El Salvador and other countries as well. So the very notion that this is outside of their scope, outside of their power, is ridiculous. It's wrong. It's completely made up.
And then he'd be returned. So I think the judge today is going to be very stern and is going to say to the lawyers for the government, what have you done to facilitate the return? And they're not going to have an answer.
What's the likelihood that he's dead? I hate this. I hate this argument. I don't want to entertain it. Shut the fuck up. It doesn't matter. This is like, what do you think this is a productive measure to like fantasize about whether or not he's been assassinated in CCOT? It's not. It's not productive at all. Shut up.
Sir, they're going to say, we can't get into foreign policy. That's foreign policy. And I don't believe that for a moment.
Right. That they're seizing on what was also in the Supreme Court opinion about the president having the ability to conduct foreign affairs and how the district court judge should really factor that in the decision. But we
don't know. And there is no reason. Hasan, you might be too R-worded to understand the farm of the U.S. What? Too R-worded to understand the farm of the U.S.? What the fuck are you saying?
The bottom line here, right, is that the White House says Abrego Garcia is under the control of El Salvador. The Salvadoran president says he has no power to release him. So who determines this man's fate?
Oh, I don't think the El Salvador.
Why are y'all too scared to admit it's even possible? It's not fantasy. It's a reality. That is a possibility. Why are y'all so scared to admit? Because it's completely irrelevant to the point of contention here. Okay, it's unproductive and completely irrelevant to engage in doomerism at this very moment. It is a pure speculative fantasy in the direction of nihilism too. That's why it's dumb as fuck. Please stop. Please stop entertaining this. Please stop engaging in this baseless speculation.
The El Salvador president doesn't think he has the power to do it. The El Salvador president said, I won't send this terrorist back. I think he does have the power, but I think he's made the decision that the man is a member of MS-13 or of the Trenda de, I can't say it right, but the other terrorist group.
Right.
Thank you. But the fact is there's no proof at all. There's no evidence at all that he's a member of either. So that seems to be just another excuse. The U.S. has admitted, has said, we made an error in sending this man out because there had been an order called withholding of removal, which means he can be removed. But he was. So we've admitted an error. We're not telling El Salvador to do it, and we should be. And of course, the El Salvador president has the power to do it if he wants to. But I think he thinks he's working with President Trump to not return this man. So yes, I see it as defiance, and I think the judge will see it as defiance. Then the question is, what can the judge do about it? Is she going to consider contempt proceedings? If she does, and if she holds the government in contempt, that brings it back to the Supreme Court, because there would be an appeal to the Fourth Circuit, then there would be the Supreme Court, and we'd hear from them again as to what's going to happen here.
As you know, Judge Sondland, the Trump administration is claiming that the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling only meant they had to remove, quote, domestic obstacles, not that they had to work with the government of El Salvador to try to bring Abrego Garcia home. They seem to be taking advantage of the court's vague language about, quote, facilitating his return. Do you think that argument will hold up?
I don't. I think they're trying to spin it favorable to the government. Each side here has claimed a victory, which is kind of interesting, but a 9-0 decision that brought every member of the court together, to me, is very clear. It means he didn't get due process, he has to be returned, and you have to facilitate that return. So I do think that the judge, as I said, will have very little patience for the government's position and will consider, what can she do about it? What can the court do? Is she really without power?
Right, that's a big question. Before we let you go, Judge, I want to get your thoughts on President's $2 billion in funding to Harvard. And just moments ago, in a post on Truth Social, Trump now says the university...
You are wrong on this one. Not one single hog will be won over by what CNN or anyone else outside of their own media cocoon says. You are still assuming that Republican lawmakers fear the wider electorate. There will not be free and fair elections. By the way, I have my own academic expertise in the study of fascism, and I'm 20 years older than you, so no more pulling the I'm the expert card. Okay, dude. You got it. Thanks. Don't worry. This kind of stuff has the capacity to have the Joe Rogans of the world be moved in this direction against Trump as well. You do not know what will happen. So stop fantasizing that there's nothing that we can do and there's no change that can happen, and that marginal improvements in getting people to be directionally focused on one of the most glaringly obvious, unconstitutional, fascist implications of policy from the Trump administration is a bad thing. Okay, it's bad. I'm 50 years old and I wrote my expertise is in fascism, so shut the fuck up and be a doomer is ridiculous. How is that in any way, shape, or form different than Fukuyama thought, where no more history will happen. No more history will happen. History is done. We ran out of history. Yeah, revolutions were a thing of the past. They will never happen again, ever again. So what should we do? Adopt a nihilistic framework and just be like, yeah, it sucks.
University should lose its tax-exempt status and be taxed as a political entity. Is this constitutional?
No, it's not. And what Harvard...
Yeah. Also, how can you say that something will not change public sentiment when Israel is right there? 2 years ago, Israel's approval rating was fantastic, okay? It's not like Israel wasn't an apartheid state 2 years ago. It still very much was. Look at Israel's approval rating now. It's in the shitter. It's in the dumps. Now, you might say the public is swayed in one direction, but that doesn't mean that the administration will follow through and be moved by the public opinion. And there's some truth to that. Okay, there is some truth to that, certainly. We're experiencing it right now. But there's only so much that the public can take until they say enough is enough. Okay, my job is to get you to that point. My job is to get as many people as possible to that point where they recognize that we are all frogs in a pan boiling right now. Okay, my job is to show you that we're in the pan and the water is boiling already.
What it has to do is what the law firms have done that are resisting Trump's orders. It will have to become the plaintiff in court. It will have to go to court and ask for an injunction and try to stop this order and take it through the court system, because it is not constitutional to lose its tax-exempt status. Yes, federal funds can be withheld by federal employees, that's for sure. So sooner or later that can be done. But it is inappropriate to talk about taking away its tax-exempt status. So I don't see that. But Harvard has taken a position that I think it had to take because it's faculty.
This is also good. Lib institutions actually fucking pushing back on Trump's ridiculous agenda is also a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Then the media starts talking about it. Okay? It's not a bad thing at all. It's significantly better than the alternative, which is what Columbia did. And Harvard did this too, by the way. They initially were playing ball with the Trump administration. The law firms were playing ball with the Trump administration. They should never have done that. They should not have conceded an inch. Okay? And they did. They folded initially. And it's not like Trump's appetite for complete control changed in the process, because you are not dealing with a reasonable force. So remember this, okay? All of these liberal institutions, these organizations, liberals in general, the people that go to Bernie rallies, I'm never going to cast them aside as, they're just libbed up. Who gives a fuck, okay? I will work with anyone and everyone that will fight back against this administration. This is how you build coalitions. This is how you successfully try to claw back power from this administration until it's far too late. So until you already have created a fucking vanguard, a militant vanguard force that is armed and equipped with the copies of fucking the little red book with AK-47s, shut the fuck up. You are not doing anything. You just want to fucking complain.
Faculty very much, 800 faculty members, I'm told, urge the university to stand up and fight this clearly unconstitutional order, as are the unconstitutional orders directed to the law firms.
Judge Shira Scheindlin, thank you so much for joining us.
The president taking this even further, saying that he's asked Pam Bondi to now study the law, potentially sending, he would say, violent U.S. citizens, deporting them out of the country to El Salvador. Legal grounds for that are what?
Non-existent, Kate. I mean, I think it's worth reminding folks, one of the complaints that we had in the Declaration of Independence at the beginning of the American Revolution was that King George was sending criminals to faraway prisons. It's almost like history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. There's no legal authority to send a U.S. citizen to serve a U.S. criminal sentence in a foreign prison. And, Kate, it would be pretty striking if there was, because that would mean any of us could be effectively disappeared.
That's the point. That is literally the point. That's what they want to do, by the way. That is what they want to do. Okay? I've been right so far on every single thing that I've said on what this administration is going to do. I've been right about this since fucking 2017, 2018, as I talked about it back then as well. And that is the goal here. Okay? And if you trust me on my assessment on all of the surrounding things that I'm talking about, then trust me on the assessment that in terms of building a broad popular coalition that will actively try to undermine this administration's agenda, you need to have fucking liberals on your side as well, okay? That's it. That's where all the momentum is. You look at all the polls that are conducted right now, and these fucking stupid-ass liberals still say Kamala Harris is the best possible candidate. They do not know what is good for them, okay? It is up to you to convince them. And you can't do that by sitting on the fucking sidelines and constantly complaining about how fucking dumb they are, okay? That's it. This is a powerful force here. There's 35 fucking thousand of you in here right now. It is up to you to convince your parents. It is up to you to convince your neighbors, to show them the way. And you can't do that if you're an annoying little fucking asshole who's constantly fucking complaining about everything and being a nihilistic douchebag. Okay? That's it. Lock the fuck in.
Peered into a prison with no U.S. legal constraints, with no potential human rights limits, no matter what. And that's a pretty scary proposition just arising out of this one immigration case.
Which is why getting your take is important, and also the fact that the president says he's asking the attorney general to then study the law when there is no legal grounds for it is noteworthy. Let's take it back then. I remember hearing you describe the Supreme Court's decision with regard to the Abrigo case as maddeningly vague. Is that then what's happened now, the necessary result of that vagueness? I mean, is the Trump administration continuing To ignore a judge or a justice's ruling, just exactly what they were going to do, given how vague it was.
100%. I mean, Kate, I think a lot of us, you know, at CNN and elsewhere, were saying Thursday night when the Supreme Court handed down its ruling that by switching from what Judge Zenas had done, which was say you must return him by a date and time certain, to this, you know, wishy-washy word facilitate, the court had created exactly this wiggle room. And, you know, Kate, maybe the Supreme Court was hoping that the Trump administration would take the hint that that decision was unanimous and would actually try to exert some pressure, diplomatic pressure, financial pressure on El Salvador to comply. I think we now know, even if we didn't last Thursday, that that's not going to happen. And so to the question of, so what's the next step in court? I don't doubt for a second is going to order the government to take more aggressive steps to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return, to put diplomatic pressure, to put economic pressure on El Salvador. You know, if the Trump administration says, you know, we tried and we can't, one, Kate, that's a pretty stunning concession of impotence on the part of this administration. But two, I think the other piece of this is that's going to create a lot of pressure on federal courts in every other immigration case to not let anybody be removed from the country until we're absolutely sure that all the I's have been dotted and all the T's have been crossed.
Now I want to play for you how President Trump's aide, Stephen Miller, is trying to interpret the Supreme Court's decision, how he believes it leaves them with no obligation to do anything further. Let me play this from yesterday.
Yes, it was a 9-0 against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has...
This is like such an insane interpretation. The court being unnecessarily vague is straight up what happened with the ICJ and Israel's genocide in Gaza. It gave them leeway to say, oh, well, we're not doing anything genocidal anyways. I'm locked in. If my wife's family sells me to administration for me being too queer, I'll organize my own Impel Down style new comma land in Sikot. Okay, good luck. You should meet up and do something with Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He's in the U.S. at the moment. Wait, really? What the fuck's he doing here? Dude, by the way, lying is so OP, as always. Lying is the most OP, okay?
Has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time. Well, no version of this...
Holy shit, look at that. Under Trump, Immigration and Customs Enforcement is becoming the modern-day equivalent of Gestapo and works tirelessly to deport children, doctors, and political activists, not the violent criminals they're supposed to apprehend. As from 2018, this is also an even earlier video that I reposted in 2018. So it's like, it's older than 7 years ago. It's probably 8 years ago, as a matter of fact.
For the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist.
ICE is Gestapo, a state-sponsored law enforcement division created to wreak havoc in our communities, separate families, and punish people, well, overwhelmingly people of color, for the crime of wanting to pursue the American dream.
When you commit a crime against this country, enter the country illegally.
Look who it is. Look who it fucking is, dude. Obama's favorite Harkonnen, melted candle wax piece of shit, Tom Homan.
You should be worried.
ICE terrorizes your neighbors with its indiscriminate exercise of force and has less to do with violent criminal apprehension than ever before. You don't target jaywalkers when you're trying to end violent crime, so why do ICE targets range from teenagers in middle school to little girls with cerebral palsy on their way to the hospital? And no, I didn't misspeak. ICE literally apprehended a child with cerebral palsy.
A 10-year-old girl with cerebral palsy faces deportation after her ambulance was stopped at an immigration checkpoint while on her way to get emergency surgery.
Do you feel safe? I feel much safer knowing that this criminal is getting deported.
Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist.
And it doesn't end there. Just look at Long Island, for example. Remember at his State of the Union where Trump made it seem like Long Island had been overtaken by Salvadorian murder gangs raping and killing indiscriminately? And by the way, MS-13 has been responsible for a high number of murders in the area, I will admit that. And violent criminals and gang members who are here illegally should absolutely be deported. However, ICE has used this statistic and Trump's constant fear-mongering to justify what The Intercept calls the new school-to-deportation pipeline. Now, in the Long Island school system, undocumented undocumented minors are not protected by the law, and they can be reported for insanely trivial things like a scribble on a notebook or for wearing a Lady Gaga t-shirt, which no one should be punished for. Lady Gaga's great. And if you're not documented yet, even if you're waiting on your
rare HasanAbi position change, no, I've said the same thing back then as well. If someone has done a crime, I say this right now, if someone has done a crime that is so heinous that it warrants deportation, that's fucking fine if they're an undocumented migrant, as long as there's due process and as long as it is appropriate to do so. I say that today. My attitude has not changed on this. What are you talking about? Oh, you mean Lady Gaga? No, I like Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga's great. Whatever. Who cares? It's entirely dependent on what the crime is, okay? And what the punishments are. If someone has done a rape, for example, I'm more comfortable putting these people through the process. If someone has done a rape as an undocumented migrant, I'm way more comfortable making sure that the courts go through the proper process, the proper proceedings, and find this person guilty, okay? And then after that, it's up to immigration courts and it's up to the fucking process to determine whether or not it's appropriate for this person to be deported, knowing full well that they are still going to serve out their sentence overseas or here. Doesn't fucking matter. This does not mean it's appropriate to fucking send them to CCOT in any, in any case. That's not my argument either.
Green card to arrive, you basically have no rights.
Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist.
And ICE not only deports children, which is already incredibly inhumane, they also target immigrants who are involved in political advocacy. They detain activists for absolutely frivolous reasons. For example, citing a 10-year-old driving infraction, ICE arrested Eliseo Dorado, who is the husband of a sanctuary church leader in Colorado. Last year, ICE detained and threatened to immediately deport dreamer Daniela Vargas right after she spoke at a rally opposing a proposed state anti-immigration law. But what does the director of ICE, Thomas Homan, have to say about all this?
I'm enforcing laws that they've enacted. I'm enforcing laws that the president signed.
Yes, I say we should prosecute crimes instead of giving a free flight home. Exactly. That is not at odds with my statement here. I have said over and over again that if there is a crime so heinous that it warrants deportation after due process has been implemented, after someone is charged and convicted, then that's fine. The notion that someone is alleged or accused of a crime, which means that it warrants deportation, is ridiculous and completely fucking unacceptable, okay?
Except that's not exactly the case, because the authorities always enjoy a great deal of discretion over which laws are enforced and how severely. The laws and enforcement in the previous administration kept ICE in check, directing agents to steer clear of otherwise law-abiding residents, even if they were undocumented. So basically, grandma doesn't get the boot for a broken taillight because that shit is inhumane. Yet, even with those directives in place, the Obama administration still deported more people than Trump in his first year. But there's one area ICE has nearly tripled its enforcement on: non-criminal immigrants. Now, under these new directives, ICE happily targets low-hanging fruit, severely increasing the amount of legal permanent residents, since to a racist shitlord like Donald Trump, these are just numbers on the board.
Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew.
It doesn't matter if you're a law-abiding legal
public defender here. Our undocumented inmates have ICE detainers. Once convicted, ICE can take them, or typically after sentence is served, ICE takes over. That's how it works now. Well, used to. Yeah. Usually the deportation comes after the sentence is served, for the record.
Permanent resident. Even if you're here legally and ICE doesn't like your tone, or if you have a tiny smudge on your record, they will target you for deportation. It doesn't matter if you were brought here at the age of 1 and 29 years later your 5-year-old son is battling leukemia. ICE will first tell you you're not a priority when you submit an application for sanctuary, then they'll detain you years later. No one is safe. Community leaders and business owners of immigrant backgrounds are subjected to intense scrutiny and get detained. Even doctors aren't safe.
A doctor has been arrested, detained by ICE after living in the U.S. for nearly 40 years.
This guy escaped Poland at the age of 5 and was a legal permanent resident for 40 years. He was nabbed for 2 crimes committed in '92 when he stole property worth under $100, and then he broke property over $100, and the offenses were later expunged from his record anyway. But that didn't stop ICE from deporting him.
Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me.
Now, I know I'll be criticized up and down for this comparison I've made linking ICE to Gestapo, but it's one that you have to understand. Yes, ICE isn't rounding up immigrants to gas them to death, but that's not how the Gestapo started off either. We live in a time when ICE is actively trying to become a US intelligence agency to get warrantless surveillance powers. History is riddled with examples of horrific, inhumane abuses perpetrated under the veil of following and enforcing the rule of law. Don't forget that Gestapo was also enforcing the laws of their land at that time. Laws of the land change with time and progress, and it's up to us to stand for that change we want to see. It's probably why Holocaust expert Robert Gallatley described the Gestapo as a reactive organization, which was constructed within German society and whose functioning was structurally dependent on the continuing cooperation of German citizens. So if Americans want to stop our very own...
Being a socialist political commentator is just fucking relitigating Groundhog Day. I feel like I have spent the last fucking decade just repeating this over again to, albeit an increasingly larger and larger audience. But sometimes I think about how fucking insane that is. Because this video, with the exception of me being like much younger, is almost damn near verbatim identical to everything that I say right now. That's why whenever people fucking ask me like, oh, how, like whenever journalists or media people ask me like, how do you do commentary in real time so fast without like an entire team of producers? I'm like, because the fucking issues haven't changed. I've done the research for the past 10 fucking years. I've flushed out the talking points for the past 10 fucking years. And considering that in the past 10 years, nothing has changed and things have only gotten worse for the exact same issues over and over again, my commentary hasn't changed in the past 10 fucking years. This is why I also laugh when people say I'm a fucking grifter, or, you know, laugh when someone who started entertaining the notion of like right-wing reactionary politics because it became fashionable, because they can fucking gain prominence off of it, comes around and says like, I'm a drama slop tuber and I think Hasan is stupid. He's a doo-doo head. He doesn't know anything he's talking about. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? The fuck?
Own modern day incarnation of the Gestapo. It's up.
There is not a lot of commentators you can fucking point to in any sector, as a matter of fact, that has this level of fucking consistency.
Up to us to speak up. It's up to us to speak out and resist. I'm Hasan Piker. Please share this video.
Anyway, here, you can show this. It's a fucking short video from literally, I think it initially was from 2017, but you can fucking show this. I want to be wrong. I've never brought up my own area of academic study until today because it's coincidentally relevant to this one specific area. It was not some ego thing. It is also the first time I can recall I've truly believed that you are mistaken. My point is made in good faith. I repeat, I want to be wrong about this. Okay. There is, given my role here, there is no reason for me to push people to succumb to reactionary nihilism, okay? Especially when things are moving in that direction. Here's Senator Chuck Grassley, okay? One of the most right-wing, oldest Republicans in Congress. I think he might be literally the oldest. Having an exchange with constituents on immigration and border security.
Border security? Yes. I believe very strongly in my Christian faith. I preach on Sundays.
Oh, it's coming up as the next video? Oh, look at that. All right, we'll get to it in a second.
Legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a Salvador.
Deportation is okay in some cases. It's just lib harm reduction. Dude, under hyper-specific instances where someone has done a crime, a heinous crime, and have served out their sentence, deportation in the aftermath of that is perfectly fucking warranted. There is no reason to have a silly back and forth here. It's ridiculous. Okay? The point here is due process. Yes, deportation to a torture prison is completely unwarranted, for the record. That is not allowed. This is precisely the reason why, for example, Norway has a no extradition policy to the United States criminal justice system. If you are caught in a Norwegian, by the Norwegian criminal justice system, for example, they won't extradite you to the United States because they understandably consider the U.S. prisons to be torture facilities. They think it is inhumane for a criminal to be extradited to the United States of America, to be tried in U.S. courts of law, to go to U.S. prisons. And that's perfectly warranted. Okay? Many countries have this non-extradition policy to the U.S. for that reason. Did you know that? America should have this as well.
Just want to get your take on his interpretation here.
I mean, you know, Kate, it's not a very long decision from the Supreme Court. It's about 2.5 pages. It doesn't say anything like what Stephen Miller said it says. Folks can read it for themselves and see that. I think it's quite telling that Stephen Miller has to try to spin the decision as saying literally the opposite of what it said in order to justify what the Trump administration is doing. But Kate, if we step back for a second, there's a larger point here, which is no court has ever actually determined that Mr. Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13, as the Trump administration claims, that he was properly removable. And so we're at the point, Kate, where if this is an argument that anyone finds persuasive, that means they can do it to us too. They can say, I'm a member of MS-13. They can say, you know, Joe Citizen is a member of MS-13, and use that as this justification for removing them, disappearing them right into the Salvadoran prison. You know, if that's a world in which
I follow just to tell you I hate you. I hope you get better, chatter. It seems like you already unfollowed before you could respond to my retort, but I don't know what has warranted you to say such things here, especially in today's commentary. But if you follow again and wait for 10 minutes, maybe you can elaborate.
Again, I think the key is courts are not going to take that lightly. And I think the result will instead be courts imposing far more onerous restrictions on the government's ability to remove folks from the country in the first place, ironically thwarting, right, the
to follow up on
Trump considering sending U.S. citizens convicted of crimes to El Salvador. By the way, we're moving in that direction already for Americans. Okay, first they will say we are removing Americans that have done heinous crimes to El Salvador, which is completely and utterly ridiculous. Okay, that's fucking insane. Then anyone and everyone that they consider to be a terrorist for political dissidents, for example, will also be removed there. And once they've already decided that you are removable to El Salvador and there's no way of extracting you back, it's done. It is de facto an exterminationist policy. It is a prison. It is a slave labor camp. It is a place where you will be disappeared to with seemingly no way of retrieval. Do you understand that? Do you understand how fucking psychotic that is? Wild that we are in the 3rd month of the Trump administration and we're already entertaining this. Logs, please, logs. Long-time member, I struggle to speak up lately because I'm also vulnerable under the admin. I'm not sure what to do. Be safe.
Immigration. Deporting American citizens to Central American prisons. Is it legal, or do you need to change the law to do it?
Well, it's another question that the president has raised. It's a legal question that the president is looking into. And he talked about this yesterday when with his meeting with President Bukele in the Oval Office. He would only consider this, if legal, for Americans who are the most violent, egregious, repeat offenders of crime who nobody in this room wants living in their communities.